Hi everyone and welcome back to the Early Bird Photo News. It's been actually quite an interesting week for me because first of all I noticed that it was leaking through the canopy on my truck, so a lot of my gear, my stuff in the back of the car got wet, which wasn't a lot of fun because we had a lot of rain lately, so I need to get that fixed. And then I thought, why not tackle some of the garden beds that I have neglected for a little while in our backyard. Ever since we moved in, we have a lot of birds in the backyard already, but there's still a lot of areas that need a bit of work. I picked one garden bed to tackle, and the first thing I find in there is a massive tree trunk. And it took me about 2 days of hard work to actually get it out, get all the roots out so I could finally plant some nice bushes in there. In the end, I succeeded, but it was definitely a lot more work than I anticipated. Another area I had neglected for a little while was actually image editing. I'd been traveling around so much, I've taken tens of thousands of images, but I haven't really had a lot of time to go back and edit some of them. So last night I finally decided it's time to sit down and edit a few more images. And the first image I edited was from our road trip in August to the Mount Isa area, where we photographed these rare and quite elusive Calcadune grasslands that only live in sort of spinifex gullies in that certain area. And this is my favorite shot of the pair that I got with male and female sitting up on a nice rock. But there's one thing with this image in particular that I wasn't quite sure of, and that's the crop. I don't know what you guys do when it comes to cropping. Do you just crop whichever ratio you want, or do you stick to a certain fixed ratio? I usually like to crop my images either 4:5 or 3:2. However, with this photo, I feel like there's a little bit too much space at the bottom in the 3:2 ratio, and it would probably look better in like a 16:9 ratio, for instance. However, then it's very difficult to present it on the internet or on phones, especially because it's going to be so long and narrow, so it doesn't take up a lot of screen space, and it's actually quite hard to view. So I'm not entirely sure what I would be doing with this image, and I thought I ask you guys, would you leave it as it is? Do you not mind having the grasses and more of the rock at the bottom? Or would you crop it also longer and narrower, which kind of puts a bit more emphasis on the two birds? Here's also a little tip when it comes to cropping. If you're cropping in Photoshop, make sure that you're untagging at the top the little box that say delete crop pixels. If that's untagged, it means whenever you crop something, it will not delete the pixels that you're cropping off, and you can go back and do another completely different crop. If you tick that box delete crop pixel, you get a smaller file size, but whenever you crop, all the pixels you crop away will be gone. So my tip is definitely to keep those pixels so that you can easily come back and recrop your images whenever you want to. One thing I noticed as well when editing a few more images is that it's very important to know the basics. We have all these AI helpers now, but most of them are actually quite sloppy. When it comes to cloning, for instance, or masking, we have done a tremendous progress with the AI helpers, but at the same time, they do quite sloppy work. For instance, the remove tool or the generative AI fill, they don't really reproduce the noise in our images properly. So if you clone something out on a clean background, you can see quite a little bit of artifacts, or if you use the generative AI tool, it doesn't reproduce any noise. And when it comes to the masking, the automatic masking is quite good, and if you do only minimal changes to the brightness, for instance, you won't really see edges. But if you're doing a little bit more aggressive editing, then also the edges will show up quite quickly, and it will look not quite good anymore once you zoom into your files. And if you print your files, for instance, proper editing is very important. So that's why I often still revert back to the methods that I teach you in my masterclass, for instance, using the clone stamp and the patch tool to remove things, because that's the best way to remove things without leaving a trace. And even though I'm tempted by the AI masking and the automatic object selection, I'm often still using my old method as well, where I select the magic wand and then expand it onto the bird and feather a slight edge onto the bird so that I have a much smoother selection. And with that selection that I teach you in my masterclass as well, it's actually much easier to do the editing and do more aggressive editing as well without leaving a trace. And if you guys want to learn all about image editing and get the most out of your photos, I would love to help you with my brush pack, my PROSETS, and my masterclass. With my PROSETS, I allow you with just one click to transform your RAW files. And with my masterclass, I teach you step by step everything you need to know in Photoshop to get amazing results. And then, if you want to get some better results faster in Photoshop, you can also check out my brush pack. So if these are of interest to you, make sure to check them out down there in the description. I also got myself a few new helpers this week. First of all, another FLEXSHOOTER head for my third tripod this time around. I have a bigger one on my big Really Ride Stuff tripod for my 600mm prime lens, and then I have two of these now on my smaller DXO tripods that I use for travel photography and when I'm walking around and when I'm filming myself, for instance. And in the past, I had these DXO tripod heads on them, these ball heads, but they're kind of difficult to set up, especially with a bigger, heavier lens. Whereas with these smaller flex shooter tripod heads, it's quite easy to have a small camera on there, or I can even have quite a big and heavy camera on there as well, and they can still balance that load quite well. And that's quite nice, for instance, if I want to film with a 200 to 800mm lens, for instance. So I'm a very big fan of these tripod heads, and this is my third one now that I will be using basically every day. And when I got the tripod head, they also asked me if I wanted to try out their latest product, their new lens plate. This one is for the 600mm prime lens, and it will actually go right to the bottom of the lens, and it will lie very close to the lens, so lowering the center of the lens, which should give us even less vibration. However, the problem with this is always, if your lens is right on here, you can't carry it anymore like you can do with the other feet. And so they developed quite a cool solution. They have this magnetic foot in here now that allows us to nicely carry the lens by the foot, and if we don't want to carry it anymore, it folds flat down onto the foot anymore. So for traveling, this should be really good. I haven't tried it out in the field yet because I only got it the other day, but I'm definitely going to attach it to my lens and let you know how I go with it, because I think, like I said, especially for traveling, this could be an amazing solution because it will take up so much less space in a backpack, for instance, than the normal foot or the other replacement feet. I just mentioned the 200 to 800mm lens, and that's definitely a lens I've been using a fair bit over the last little while to photograph in my backyard, for instance, because I like the ability to zoom from like 500 to 800mm without having to put in extenders. And there's just one thing I noticed with this lens that is actually quite difficult to deal with, and that's once the front element gets dirty, it's very hard to clean for some reason. And I talked to a friend of mine about it, and he said that it has to do with the coatings that are kind of missing on that lens. All the L lenses, they scratch much easier, but they're also much easier to clean because of some of the other coatings they have on the front element. Whereas these lower end lenses like the 200 to 800mm lens or some of the STM lenses, they don't have the coating, so they don't stretch as easily, but at the same time they're actually very hard to clean. And I had that a few times now that I got some, for instance, a bit of salt spray on the front element or some other dirt, or that it was just fogging up, and whenever I try to clean it, I literally have to rub it for like 5 minutes until it's actually clean. So this is definitely one area in the field where I would prepare myself with if I have that lens. And for me at the moment, if I have enough clean tissues with me that I can wipe the front element with, it hasn't been a problem, but it's definitely an area where I wish it would be a little bit easier to clean, because a few times I've been scrubbing on that lens for a little while to actually make sure that it's clean enough to keep shooting. Has Canon fooled us all? Well, it kind of looks like that, at least when we're looking at the latest news that Canon Rumors has been posting. From my own sources I've been talking to over the last little while, it always sounded like that the R5 Mark II won't be coming out until sometime like August maybe. But now the latest rumor has it that instead of the R1 coming first and then the R5 Mark II later in the year, it now looks like that was turned around, and now the R5 Mark II might be coming out sometime like April or May, for instance, and then the R1 will only come out later in the year. So at this stage, I don't really know what to believe anymore, and I guess we just have to wait and see. But personally, I thought it would actually be nice to have the R1 first, but at the same time, fingers crossed, I'm thinking now that the rumors that we heard recently that it's only 30 megapixels and some of the other specs that we didn't like as much might hopefully be not true if the camera comes out much later in the year. So for now, we basically know nothing, but at the same time, it's a good reminder that not everything that's being said or written on the internet is actually true. What's also quite interesting is that Canon seems to be already redoing some of the RF lenses, like a new version of the 70 to 200mm lens and possibly also a new version of the 28 to 70mm lens. Both of these lenses came out right at the start when Canon was announcing their lens lineup, and the 28 to 70 was kind of showing off what Canon could do with amazing sharpness and that f2f stop, but at the same time that lens is also very big and heavy, so maybe they now have an ability to make that lens smaller and lighter, and then it would actually become quite attractive, I'd say. And when it comes to the 70 to 200mm lens, it seems like the Canon has been listening to people that all said that they don't like the external zoom of the current 70 to 200mm lenses, and so it's very likely that Canon will bring sometime in 2024 an internal zooming to 70 to 200mm f2.8 lens. Is that something that you're interested in? Are you against the external zooms? Personally, I must say I don't really have any bad experiences with them, but overall an internal zoom is probably the better choice, also because it seems more weather sealed, but at the same time you're paying for it with a bigger and longer lens. Over the last few weeks, I've also been testing the Nikon Z8 with the new firmware, and I must say it's definitely a drastic improvement with the camera. And I must also commend Nikon on continuously developing the camera through firmware updates. It's definitely something that we haven't seen from the other two manufacturers, and it's something as customers that we would definitely love to see. Because Nikon hasn't done only small changes or needed updates, and the autofocus was part of the needed updates, but they've also added some fantastic new features like the pixel shift or the auto capture. So it's not only small advancements, but also really new and great added features via firmware. And this is definitely something that I would love to see also from other brands. Speaking about firmware, there's another rumor that we might see a big Sony A1 firmware update, and at this stage I must say I only believe it when I see it, because there's been these rumors over the last little while and normally they didn't really eventuate into anything. So hopefully this time around we will actually see a Sony A1 update with much needed features like eye tracking in video mode, for instance. Using these amazingly small and light Nikon lenses like the f6.3 600mm PF lens or the f4.5 400mm lens with the Z8 did kind of make me think, what's next for Micro Four Thirds? In the past, the main advantage of Micro Four Thirds was that it was a little bit cheaper and also that you could have much smaller lenses and get some fantastic reach with it due to the 2x crop factor. However, now that there's full frame lenses that are often lighter and can achieve something similar like the Nikon 600mm PF lens with the teleconverters, for instance, I did wonder, what's going to happen to Micro Four Thirds? Are they going to keep developing new lenses and putting more money into the system? Or is it kind of something that has peaked and it's kind of dwindling away slowly from here? What's your take on that? I'm saying this because when we're looking at Olympus or OM Systems, kind of the leading company in Micro Four Thirds, especially when it comes to nature and wildlife photography, it does seem like that their latest camera release is only a marginal update to the old version of the camera. And then they've also released that 150 to 600mm lens that's actually kind of the same size and weight of a full frame lens. So while it's great to see new lenses, and this lens definitely has an amazing reach with a 2x crop factor of up to 1200mm, but at the same time it doesn't feel like it was a lens that was developed with weight or size or price in mind necessarily, because the lens is quite heavy, fairly big, and also quite expensive. So kind of going against the grain of what Micro Four Thirds usually stands for. So I'm not sure where Micro Four Thirds is heading, but I would love to hear your thoughts about it in the comments as well. Is that a system that you're using, that you want to be using in the future? And what's your take on it? Is it going to develop more? Is there going to be more money spent on R&D? Or is it something where the companies kind of produce new lenses, new cameras, but there's not really that much progress anymore? Speaking about small and light lenses, there's another company that seems to be releasing one for the Sony system this time around, and that's Sigma with a 5.6 500mm lens that's rumored to be less than 1.5 kilos and cost around the $3,000 mark. So another very small and lightweight prime telephoto lens, similar to what we're getting from Nikon already. So I definitely love seeing that trend of smaller and lighter prime lenses, and hopefully, I'm looking at you, Canon, this is something that we will also see from other brands. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this week's early bird photo news. I hope you enjoyed them. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. Let me know all your thoughts in the comments. Check out my channel membership and hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next video very soon. Bye guys.